where we enter the debate. We think a war criminal, no matter how many people he killed or no matter how many people he oppressed, should still be considered human. We recognize that hundreds of people's lives were destroyed. We recognize that hundreds and thousands of victims were created during that dictator or war criminal's reign. But we think that all crimes are still crimes against humanity to different degrees, right? But we don't believe that anything you can do can merit you losing your humanity at any point of time. This is the stance of closing opposition. Because they come up here with such a vengeful form of retribution, right? Because he comes up here and talks about humanity for humanity. Number one, we think this is a medievalistic form of retribution. The idea of an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, right? We don't think this is something that we should work towards, particularly when you talk about a common humanity, something I'll be discussing about later. Because we don't take away every single person's property when that person steals, right? We don't rape somebody who raped other people. We don't, and we think that even the death penalty is something that's also contentious. In the same way, we think that their ideas of taking away somebody's humanity just because he committed a crime against humanity is something ridiculous, right? That's why we have trials. That's why we have a life sentence. We assume, of course, that this is when a dictator has lost power, right? Because that's when you're able to properly implement this kind of policy. But we think that after that trial is done, after that person was punished, after that person has served his time, or even died in prison, then that person's justice has already been committed. We don't believe in tarnishing that kind of humanity by not allowing him burial rights. This is something that coming directly from closing opposition. No, thank you, I'll take you in a bit. Then we talk about re-entrenching ideologies, right? And how when you have a burial right, you'll suddenly think that everybody is great and what these people did are awesome. We don't think that just because you have a burial right, then everyone is going to immediately think that Hitler was a wonderful person, that Hitler should be somebody who should be respected. We think that's unrealistic and we think that's assertive. We think that there are, number one, that there are other counter-narratives that exist. For example, victims can always come forward with their own problems and things like that. We think that, and furthermore, when you talk about eulogies, we think that number one, people have the right to come up with these kinds of things and see people as human, right? Because at the end of the day, these dictators and war criminals should still be considered human, or people who had lives and died. And at the end of the day, we think that the existence of other things that can mitigate their very small harms are things that don't necessitate the fact that you should deny these burials to begin with. Then a close member comes up here and goes all gorilla man and says we have to destroy the essence of these dictators. We think that that rhetoric is really strong coming from them, but we think that that leads me straight to my first argument, right? On how you can never really destroy the essence of humanity, and that's something we want to uphold coming from closing opposition. But before I move on,
if I wanted to understand my oppressor was defeated, then our model already dragged him to court and branded him a murderer. Be the first one in opposition to respond to Jin's frame, because these are not just regular thieves, these are people who took years to build up people's trust and then destroyed it with mass murder.
Yeah, so basically the only difference they give is the idea that these are premeditated and people actually planned for these crimes, right? We don't think that in any way the crimes are lessened. We recognize that these people committed really bad things and did really horrible atrocities towards their victims. But we don't recognize why a trial and the kind of punishment that you get from that kind of trial isn't enough, because we think that's the justice we want to uphold. I'll be talking to you about two ideas today, right? I'll be talking to you firstly about the common humanity, and this is where I break the deadlock coming from opening side. Then I'll talk to you about the idea of how justice is not continuous and how we need to make sure that these things are punishing the crime and not the people. Okay. So let's talk about the common humanity and why we should continue to respect it. Because this is a deadlock that happened at opening. How both sides were really unfair, how both sides had self-serving characterizations. Now let's bring to you the characterization coming from closing. We think that humanity is inalienable, that nobody can take it away from you, that nobody can transfer it, and it's untransferable. And we think that we punish war criminals, particularly because you wanted to protect that very humanity to begin with, right? We think that we all have a duty to protect each other's humanity. So what you do when you try to destroy his essence is justify the very actions that were committed. That everybody else's humanity gets forward on your side and nobody really wins. Because this is such a reactive kind of policy. How you deny humanity for humanity. But we understand the animal urge to be vengeful, but we recognize that everybody should hold each other up to higher moral ascendancy. Because if we aren't able to uphold each other, if we aren't able to hold each other to that kind of ascendancy, right, then how are we ever going to justify the idea that we're punishing people for crimes against humanity? Furthermore, we think it's problematic, the idea that the state is arbitrating who can have it and such, because we don't think there's any way to fully implement this for every single war criminal. But even if there was a way for that kind of thing, we recognize the idea that people should still respect that humanity, that people should still respect that kind of thing that we all share. At the end of the day, death is the great equalizer, and this is why a burial is so important. When you present that last image of humanity, it is a recognition that you live and that you die. This is something that everybody has. And if you destroy one, then destroy everybody else's. And that's the kind of link provided by our side. You harm the victims, you harm that dictator, you harm that war criminal, you harm every single person in this room right now who shares that same humanity. Let's talk to you about this next idea, right? On how justice is not continuous. Like, we don't believe that we should continue to punish a person continuously, even after he has died. We think that it's the very same reason why laws are not retroactive, nor are laws transcendent. Because we think that court decisions are in effect in that person's lifetime. That's why you don't continue to punish children of criminals, for example, children who are considered their legacy, which is tied to their humanity. We imagine this kind of society, a kind of society that believes that justice should continue to punish person even after that person has died. We think that it's important to trust in the punishments that are provided for in the justice system, for example, life imprisonment and things like that. And that's the kind of justice we want on our side. We believe their side is just being not commensurate and just going back to the medieval times when we didn't recognize the fact that every single person had a shared humanity. Because we think that humanity is the value. We don't believe in destroying the essence. In fact, we don't believe that essence is even destroyable to begin with. We believe in the interest of every single person and every single actor of this debate. You have the side with closing opposition. Thanks.